Hey guys, and welcome back to Hoosier Hardware, and today we're going to take one more look at the Snowman cooler. And this is like a legendary cooler from AliExpress that's been used around the world in budget builds because it costs roughly $20, but it can handle CPUs all the way up to what we would start to call enthusiast grade CPUs. And again, it's only $20, but if you're in the United States, there are a couple of competitors, and this totally depends on what marketplace you're looking at, but one of those competitors is the Deepcool Gammaxx 400 V2 that I'm going to be taking a look at today. And both of these coolers do feature a very similar look with the same general layout, single tower, 4 heat pipes, that sort of thing. So I want to look at the two and see which one is worth your roughly $20. Is it the Snowman cooler or is it the Gammaxx 400 V2? Now, as we get started, I do have a couple of PC builds coming up featuring both of these coolers. I have a Ryzen 1700 build from AliExpress heading this way, as well as a Xeon, and this is an X99 sort of recycled chipset thing coming from AliExpress as well that's gonna feature one of these coolers. So if you want to see those videos, make sure you're subscribed down below. So as we get started here, we should mention the similarities between the Snowman and the Gammaxx 400 V2, and that starts with the single tower approach. Both of these coolers have that single tower CPU heatsink with a 120mm fan attached to it. Now that's where the similarities do start to deviate just a little bit. The Gammaxx has an LED fan, and the problem with that LED fan is, unlike previous versions of this cooler, this particular LED fan, this red one that came with the Gammaxx 400 V2, has the LEDs sort of inside the fan hub, and the wires that power those LEDs are not easy to get to. So the maneuver that I had planned on doing was actually to cut those wires and completely disable the red LED lighting, which gives it a more neutral aesthetic. Unfortunately, I couldn't get at those wires easily, at least, so I'm stuck with these red LEDs that may or may not go with your build, whereas the Snowman is, at least to me, a more aesthetically pleasing fan just because it's more neutral. Now when it comes to more meaningful changes, the Gammaxx 400 V2 does have slightly smaller heat pipes. They have 5mm heat pipes that are exposed, just like the 4 heat pipes that are exposed on the Snowman cooler. The difference being the Snowman cooler has 6mm heat pipes, which in practice probably don't really give a big advantage one way or the other, but it is worth noting. The other thing I do want to point out with the physical differences is that to the touch, the Snowman cooler actually has a flatter plane when it comes to those heat pipes. As you run your finger across the heat pipes on the Snowman cooler, you can't really tell the transition from heat pipe to aluminum back to heat pipe as you go across those heat pipes. Whereas with the Gammaxx 400 V2, you actually can tell the ridges between the heat pipes and the aluminum between the heat pipes. So again, I don't know that that's going to have a big performance advantage towards the Snowman or give a big performance advantage one way or the other, but it is worth noting. Moving right on along to differences in mounting here, the Snowman cooler has a simpler mounting method, but it also feels like a more dangerous mounting method, and that's because it uses those AMD stock clips, but the mounting pressure is actually really high when you first take the Snowman cooler out of the box, to the point where what I would do if I were you is when you take a Snowman cooler out of the box, I would actually flex that mounting system a little bit to loosen it up and make it a little bit easier to mount onto a motherboard. Now the Snowman cooler does come with a mounting ring to adapt an LGA socket of some sort to a clip style. So it does use those clips regardless of whether we're talking LGA or AMD. It's simpler on the AMD side because you don't have to install anything else, but the mounting ring is very simple to use. So the Snowman cooler does get props for using a simple mounting method. It just feels kind of dangerous when you're putting a lot of pressure as you try to force those clips down the first time. So again, I would loosen up the mounting system just a little bit out of the box. Now the Gammaxx 400 V2 uses a intuitive mounting solution, though I would say it's a little bit more complex, and out of the box it may be a little intimidating, but the Gammaxx cooler does come with good instructions, and once you figure out what is going on with the universal backplate the Gammaxx cooler is using, then it's absolutely no problem whatsoever. And again, it feels like a safer solution, albeit it does take a little bit longer to actually install. Now testing is going to be done on the Ryzen 5600X using IDA 64 and the built-in stress test test within IDA 64, and both CPU coolers are using Arctic MX4 thermal paste, and that's because the Snowman cooler doesn't come with thermal paste, whereas the Gammaxx cooler does. But I don't want to give an advantage to the Snowman cooler by using Arctic with it and using the stock thermal paste with the Gammaxx cooler, because I sort of get a feeling the MX4 is a better thermal paste than what Deepcool is shipping with the Gammaxx 400 V2. So with that, we're just using Arctic MX4, but do be aware that if you get a Snowman cooler, you will have to provide your own thermal paste, and that will add a couple few dollars to the cost of that cooler. And when we're only talking about roughly $20, that may be significant for you, or you may not really care about it. Now, as we watch the time lapse of both coolers, what you'll notice is, yeah, they come out to a very, very similar temperature here. They're both sort of in that upper 60s range, and there is a little bit of variation, especially as you see the test sort of progress on the Snowman cooler. At one point, it's a little bit higher, then it drops down to a little bit lower. But the takeaway here is they perform almost identically when you're looking at the raw temperatures. But what I will say is, in a noise normalized environment, it would seem that the Snowman cooler is actually going to perform better, and that seems to be down to the Snowman seems to have just a better fan attached to it. In fact, at the stock, just out of the box settings, it is noticeably quieter than the Deepcool Gammaxx 400 V2. And I know that's hard to convey on video, so I'll let you take a listen and see the difference between the Snowman and the Gammaxx. And keep in mind, this is purely stock settings out of the box. I didn't touch fan curves or anything. So that brings us on to conclusion time, and in my opinion, the Snowman cooler is the better cooler when you're comparing Snowman versus Gammaxx 400 V2, and that mostly comes down to the fan. Out of the box, it is a more aesthetically neutral look, which I personally like, but if you're building a build around maybe a red themed build, that red LED fan, maybe that is something that you're interested in. But for me, keeping that neutral aesthetic is actually more important because it'll fit into pretty much any build. More importantly though, it is significantly quieter than the Gammaxx 400 V2. Even if you do have to account for adding in the cost of thermal paste, those extra couple dollars to me may be worth it, because I do like providing my own thermal paste to begin with, just so I know that what I'm putting on the CPU is going to be good to go for a long period of time. I don't have to worry about the quality because I know Arctic MX4 is good stuff. Though again, that's just one more thing for you to consider if you're thinking about one of these two coolers. Now for the downsides though, the mounting pressure of the Snowman out of the box is uncomfortable to say the least. I would actually, if you're putting this into a system that's already put together, I would pull the motherboard out completely and put it on a flat, stable surface so you're not flexing the motherboard as you put pressure on the Snowman. And as I said earlier, I would actually loosen up that mounting mechanism a little bit to make it a little bit easier to mount. Also worth noting is the Snowman cooler likely is gonna have a significantly higher shipping time than the Gammaxx 400 V2, especially if you're in the United States. But depending on where you are in the world, getting something from AliExpress may take a lot longer than just picking something up off of Amazon or eBay or Walmart.com or something locally. So if you're needing something in the very near future, the Gammaxx may actually be your only option here, because the Snowman will take, at least for me, if you're in the United States, it's going to take around a month to show up at your door, and that's if you're lucky, and those shipping times may vary wildly depending on what seller you're buying it from. So obviously those are my experiences comparing the Gammaxx 400 V2 from Deepcool to the legendary now Snowman cooler, these roughly $20 coolers sort of duking it out. But I do want to hear from you guys. If you own one of these two coolers, whether it's the Snowman or the Gammaxx 400 V2, let me know your experiences in those comments down below. And of course, if you like this video and you want to see more like it, give it a like, share, subscribe, and comment. All those things are very helpful for the channel. You can follow me both on Instagram and on Twitter at Hoosier Hardware. And as always, I'll let YouTube queue up a couple more videos from my channel for you to watch. I'm Shane with Hoosier Hardware, and I'll see you guys in the next video.